Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Anna, aka Brookwillow, and today I have a special video for you all about supported spindle spinning. Maybe it's something you've been considering to try out but don't know where to start, or you just need a little distraction from life. Either way, I hope you stick around and learn a little bit about my process. I first started supported spindle spinning earlier this year in January, and the moment I got the hang of it, I was absolutely hooked. I love the very slow, meditative process, and better yet, it even turns out to be some of my favorite yarn I've ever spun and knit with. This video won't be so much of a tutorial, but more of a resource to help get you started. The beauty of it all is that it doesn't actually really require much equipment. Of course, there's equipment out there that can make it a lot easier for you in the long run, but getting started, you don't really need that much. So let's talk about the materials that you do need to get started. The first one, obviously, is that you need a supported spindle. And here is an example of one that I have. You may see a lot of spindles out there that have a little hook at the top or a whorl on the top. That's more of a suspended spindle or drop spindle. The difference with a support spindle is it has a point at the bottom, some type of shape right here, and it doesn't have anything for your yarn to attach onto at the top there. So really, it kind of looks just like a wand. They come in several different types. I'm not going to go into all the different types of supported spindles because there's a lot of different ones, but I want to focus on some of my favorite spindle makers that I've collected so far. Many people have asked me, where and how do you get your spindles? And I won't lie, they can be very challenging to get your hands on. There aren't a lot of spindle makers out there, and there's a very high demand for them. But I'm first going to show you some of my favorite makers, and then I will give you a few tips on how you can get your hands on one as well. One of my favorite spindle makers is the Spindle Shop. They are based out of Australia, and they come out with a new drop of spindles mostly on a weekly basis, and I've been able to get 2 different ones from them. So this is the first one here. I think it's very beautiful. I believe this is a Tibetan style spindle, and it spins very fast and very smooth. One of the things that I love about this particular spindle is that it has a metal tip on the bottom of it, which means it won't wear down, or at least won't wear down quite as fast as a wooden tip would. So I do like that, and it tends to spin a little bit faster than certain wooden tip spindles. Here is another one from the same maker, and this is more of a teardrop shape, but I really love these nonetheless. And they all come with certificates that give the authenticity of the spindle, and it talks about the different types of exotic woods that are used, and I just think they are a beautiful work of art. This particular wood turner comes out with so many beautiful different spindles on a weekly basis. I recommend following their Instagram. I think it's just the Spindle Shop. I'll link everything down below, but you can at least take a look at all of the beautiful spindles that they put out with. Now, I also want to say these are not in order of my favorite to least favorite. There's no way that I would be able to choose which one is my favorite, but I just want to give you an idea of the different types of makers that there are out there. Here is another one. This is from the Spanish Peacock, and this is one of their staple styles that they seem to always have in their drops. And this one, I was giving you an example of a wooden tip here, but I will say in this particular case, this tip still spins very fast even though it's wooden, and B, it doesn't wear down quite as fast as other wooden tips that I have spun with. So I really recommend the Spanish Peacock if you can get your hands on one of these. They do have a Discord group that talks about when there'll be certain drops that you can try to get your hands on. They also have a lottery where you can sign up and get your name drawn to be able to be the first one to shop the collection before it all sells out, because with these spindles, they do sell out within minutes when they're dropped. So you kind of have to be ready for it, and you have to be very quick on the keyboard to be able to score one. Another one of my favorites, and it does have yarn on it right now, is from Enid Ashcroft. And they put out spindles also on a weekly basis, I believe on Saturdays on their Etsy. So that's a good place to find their spindles. But I just love the different wood grain on this particular spindle. And again, I love the metal tip and just how it spins in general. It has a very fast spin to it. This spindle right here is the newest to my collection. It's one that I have been wanting to get from this maker for a very long time, and it's from Mingo Asho. They also sell their products on Etsy. But one thing that's very unique about this particular one is it has a glass bead at the bottom, and I believe they call it a glindle, is the glass spindle here. They also burn these beautiful images into the wood too for a very just all over lovely spindle. This one I absolutely love spinning with, and I definitely am going to be on the lookout for more with a glass bottom, because this is like one of my favorite to spin with. So a couple tips on how to get your hands on spindles. The first one would be the most guaranteed way of getting a spindle would be to pre-order one. There are a few makers out there that you can pre-order a spindle. It may take a month or two to get it in, but you'll know that you'll eventually get it, and you don't have to sit and just be upset at these drops if you aren't able to get one fast enough. One of the makers that does this is Woodland Handcrafts. This is a particular maker that I personally have not been able to get anything from their drops because they just go too fast for how fast my fingers can type. But I have been thinking about pre-ordering one. And the nice thing about pre-ordering from them is you can customize the spindle a little bit as well. But I highly recommend checking out their website because they do have so many adorable, beautiful spindles for pre-order. Another maker that offers pre-orders is Straddle Creek Spins, and I have one of their spindles that I myself pre-ordered. This is also a Tibetan style spindle with a little metal tip on it, and I've been very happy with how this particular one spins. So they do pre-orders on Etsy as well, and I recommend checking them out. I think this is a really nice beginner spindle to spin with. Another way that you can get your hands on a spindle is to buy them secondhand. There is a Ravelry group called Spindle Candy where a lot of people de-stash some of their old spindles because they need to, sell some things for money for an emergency that came up, or the spindle just isn't connecting with them very well. I purchased one secondhand on Ravelry, and I'm very happy with the purchase that I made. This particular one is from a maker called Mirkwood, and I believe this is the Legolas, and it has a little jewel tip on the front that I really like. But yeah, I got this one secondhand, and sometimes you can save a little bit of money by purchasing it that way. Like they'll drop down the price that they paid for it originally. So this is a very good option on how to get one if you haven't been able to score one from a drop. Once you secure a spindle, you'll need a little bowl or dish to spin it on. There's bowls out there that are made specifically for spindles, like this one here. from Mingo Asho. It actually came for free with the spindle that I bought, and it's one of my favorite bowls actually. It just has a little indent here and just beautiful glasswork on it as well. There's this specialized bowl that I got from the Spindle shop. I think this one's really great, especially when I was first starting out, because there's like a little indent here that kind of holds the spindle in place. It kind of reminds me of if you go cross-country skiing and you're a class 6 skier, there's those little tracks that your skis fit in so your legs and your feet aren't slipping around. This kind of reminds me of that, and it's reversible. So there's a shallow indent here, and then there's a deeper one on this side if you need just like a little bit more support. But you certainly do not need to get a specialized bowl. I was able to thrift this one here for $2 at Goodwill, and it works pretty well. It definitely gets the job done. I will say the base of it might be a little too wide because the spindle kind of slips around a little bit, but it definitely does work, especially if I just try to spin it more on the groove on the inside. You probably don't even have to go to Goodwill to buy something secondhand. You could even use like a teacup or just really any shallow little bowl type thing. I would recommend glass first, but I know some people use ceramic. I do have a wood bowl that came with a spindle. I don't love it. I think it slows down the spindle itself, and there's little grooves in the bowl that it just kind of gets trapped in a little bit. So I don't totally recommend a wood bowl, but if it's all you have, then it certainly will work. All right, so you have your spindle, you have your bowl, then you obviously need fiber to spin with. I'm not gonna go and list off all of the fiber suppliers out there because there is quite a bit, but I recommend looking on Etsy or searching through Instagram. I've been able to find a lot of fiber dyers through other people who are spinning, so I kind of keep an eye out if they're tagging the fiber that they're using on their posts, and that has helped me find other fiber myself. One of my favorite places, though, I will say, for purchasing fiber to spin with is at fiber festivals. I tend to kind of stock up when I go because I really like to be able to see and feel all of the fiber in person and buy quite a few braids, and then I have enough to last me until the next fiber festival that I go to. I definitely am not going to get into processing raw fleece or anything in this video. I'm primarily just going to be working with dyed combed tops because that's what I like to spin on a spindle with. I really love spinning with fiber that changes color because it's just all part of the process and why I love spinning with a spindle. So for today, I'm going to be working with this particular fiber that I purchased from Yarn Jam, and this is their confetti tweed, which is 89% natural Shanico and 6% acrylic, which I think is probably what these little neps are in the fiber, and then 5% rayon. But I think it's very beautiful, and I'm excited to spin with it because I haven't spun with this particular dyer before. Now, when you're spinning, you're not going to want to maybe spin right from the end. You certainly can, but it can be a little bit more challenging to draft this way. So when I first started out, I really liked spinning from the fold, and I'll give you a little example of what that looks like. So what I do is I take a little bit of the fiber here and kind of spread it out a little bit. That helps me to break off a chunk. And yeah, so like I said, you can spin it from the top, but it's just gonna be a little bit harder to draft. You're gonna get really big chunks, and if you're trying to spin a really fine yarn, it makes it kind of challenging. So when I first started out, I would spin from the fold, and all you really have to do with that is I just fold it over my finger like this, and then I draft it this way from the fold. It just tends to draft a little bit easier onto the spindle. Now there is another way that you can prepare your fiber. It does require a few more tools that you may not have, but something that if this is something that you really enjoy doing, I would definitely recommend investing into this. And what it is I make my own rollags, and how I do that is by using these carders here. I actually bought these secondhand from Bridget Zoo, who is also BZB Knits on Instagram. She's a really nice knitwear designer as well, so I was very happy to purchase these hand carders from her. These are Kromsky, and yeah, I've been really enjoying these so far. So how I make my rollag is I take about this much chunk of fiber and I just set it on the carder here, and sometimes I'll push it in just a little bit like that, and then flip this around. I take this one and I'll comb it through a few times. This also is a nice way to maybe blend some of the colors. I will say this particular dyer does a really nice job of blending the dye throughout where it flows nicely. I've worked with other fiber where it can be a little bit splotchy, and I don't want it to cause a barber look on the fiber that I'm spinning, so the carding helps just blend those colors out a little bit better. But yeah, so basically what I'm going to do is just take it and brush it out. Of course, I'm having stage fright. It's not looking as nice as I usually do. Sometimes it can look like a hot mess like this, but I'll just kind of straighten it out and take it off the carder, and then I'll roll it up into a little rollag. The way that I do that is I actually have just been using these two metal reusable straws, and they work super well. And all you do is you place one down and then push the other one under, and then you roll it up. Like such. So it's definitely not a beautiful rollag. Mine always kind of tend to be a little bit crazy looking, but there are certain dyers out there that sell fiber that's already prepped into rollags. So maybe if you don't have your own carders, it'd be worth buying something that's already prepped like this. But this, once I started making the rollags, it quickly became my favorite way to spin the fiber from, because it just, you pull it out from the top and it just drafts so easily from the end. Now, I want to talk about some resources for tutorials on how to actually spin the fiber onto the spindle. Like I mentioned, I'm no expert. I just started doing this last January, so it hasn't been a whole year. I certainly can spindle spin, but I am probably not the go-to person on how to actually do it. I personally learned how to do it from School of Sweet Georgia, which is an online school similar to Craftsy or Skillshare, but they focus just pretty much on the fiber arts, which is great. And I've used them for all different types of fiber art, like weaving on my loom. That's actually the whole reason why I got School of Sweet Georgia, and I learned how to dye natural fibers on there. By the way, this isn't sponsored by School of Sweet Georgia, but they're just a really great online resource on how to actually spin. I took their supported spindle spinning class and was able to learn from that. I do think there are a lot of good videos out there on YouTube. I would recommend anything that has Jillian Moreno in it. She's an excellent teacher for all sorts of ways to spin. But yeah, I would definitely check out YouTube and School of Sweet Georgia. Even if you just purchase like 1 month from there, because I think it's like $25 a month now. Just do 1 month and take the spinning class or as many classes as you want in that 1 month, and then you can just cancel it right away and you have a lifelong skill beyond that. But I will say, when I personally first started spinning, it wasn't pretty the first little bit. It takes kind of a certain touch, but once you get the hang of it, it just clicks and it all makes sense from there. Okay, welcome to my lap. Now, I forgot to mention at the beginning of this video, I think my favorite thing about spinning with a spindle is that you can do it while sitting on the couch or in a chair, and it can just be a super cozy way to spin. You don't have to be sitting any certain type of way, like on the wheel or anything like that. I usually sit cross-legged on the couch, but for today I'm sitting in the chair. But you definitely want to have it more in your lap. You don't want it set up at a table because you're not going to get as much range of drawing out the fiber. So to start out, I personally spin the spindle in my left hand and then I draft from my right hand. It's good to practice a little bit flicking the spindle and kind of getting the hang of that. But one thing that really helps me is I just flick it and then I pinch these 2 fingers together, and that way the spindle doesn't have anywhere to go. It kind of just hangs out in this little circle here. Otherwise it'll fall down and you'll just have to keep picking it back up. So yeah, I practiced that a few times and kind of get the hang of spinning it. Always make sure you're flicking it in the same direction too, no matter what, because when you go to ply it, you would ply it in the opposite direction. So you just want to make sure that you're always spinning it in the same direction. So when I'm spinning my singles, I always spin clockwise, and then when I ply them counterclockwise. So to start out, you just draft out a little bit of the fiber, and then I just poke the tip through there, and I just kind of do a little pre-spin like that, just to get a little bit of a spin right here, and then I stab it through the fiber once again. And you can do this like 2 or 3 times. I'm just gonna maybe do it one more time for good measure. And then eventually you can push it all the way down, but I need to spin a little bit before I can push it all the way down. So then what you're gonna do is you're gonna flick the spindle, and it's going to create kind of like a little candy cane up the shaft. And when it's spinning and flicking off the top of the tip there, that's what's causing the yarn to spin. And of course, I already drafted this out a little too much. Just reconnect that. So hopefully you can see this okay. You see how it's flicking off the top there? That's what's causing it to spin the yarn. And I'm just gonna get it going a little bit more until I can push it all the way to the bottom. And then basically the gist of it is you just keep drafting out a little and spinning a little. Now, when I first started spinning, it was a very slow process because I would stop the spindle every time I had to draft it out, because if I was drafting it, it was picking the spindle up. But if you pinch the fiber right here while the spindle is still spinning, so I'll spin the spindle, it's still spinning, I'm pinching this fiber, it's allowing me to draft out a little bit. So once you have like an arm's length of fiber that's spun, then you'll wind it up. The cop is what they call it. And you will only want to wind up the cop, I would say, just over halfway. If you go all the way to the tip, it becomes very hard. You want quite a bit of room to be able to flick the spindle. If you only have like this much room to flick it, it just becomes really challenging, and the fiber starts kind of falling off the top, and it's just no good. So I'll kind of show you how high up I like to go when I'm spinning. And this is a little underspun, so I'm going to spin that a little bit more. This is about as high as I'd like to go with this particular spindle, and then you begin spinning onto it, going back down. And one thing I'll say is, once you kind of create that first initial wind, you won't want to go beyond this ever, because then the yarn just gets very tangled and it becomes very challenging to wind it off the spindle. One thing that a lot of people do as they're spinning, and I heard it's a very efficient way to spin, is they kind of wind a temporary cop at the top here, like I just did, and then they'll go back in once it gets a little full and wind it onto the main portion down at the bottom here. I personally don't love doing that, because then you have to like butterfly the fiber, and sometimes it breaks on me and then I have to attach it. But I personally just like to spin a little bit and then immediately wind it on to the main cop. I just think it's easier for me. But if you find that it's more efficient to make a temporary cop at the top, I would recommend doing whatever is easiest for you. I wind it up until it gets to be about this full. It will reach a point where it becomes challenging to spin it. Like, it just gets so heavy that your hand will start cramping up as you're spinning the spindle, and it'll get topsy-turvy. But this is a very full cop, and this is about where I will stop for each spindle. Another common question that I get is, how on earth do you get the fiber off of the spindle and onto something that you can ply it with? When I first started out, I would hold the spindle in my hands like this, and I would attach this fiber to a leader on my spinning wheel and then just spin it onto a spinning wheel bobbin, so something like this. And then I would have it all spun up on the bobbin, ready to ply however I plan on plying the yarn. And that worked out very well until I discovered that you can also ply it onto a little weaving bobbin. So this is a weaving bobbin that you load it up with yarn and put it into a shuttle to weave on a loom with. So I have a floor loom and I do a bit of weaving, so that's why I have a bobbin winder and I wind the spindle yarn onto the bobbin. And these work out really well because you can put these on a lazy Kate and then ply it all from the lazy Kate. And again, these are extra equipment that you may need that will definitely make your spinning journey a lot easier. I think another option, if you don't have a wheel or you don't have a bobbin winder, would be to make your own lazy Kate from like a cardboard box. There's a lot of different tutorials on how to do that, but the only thing that would concern me is potentially warping or damaging the spindles. They aren't cheap, so you definitely want to take good care of them. But I have seen different stands you can buy that you can just slip the spindle into and then ply it right off of that into whatever kind of yarn you're plying it into. I will say though, the little bobbins that you get for the weaving loom are really nice to store fiber singles that you just haven't gotten around to yet. So these are 2 singles that I'll be spinning together to make a yarn that looks like this here. And I just haven't gotten around to finishing up plying these, and they've made great storage bobbins. And so, yeah, this is what it looks like when they're plied onto the bobbins, and then you could just add these to a lazy Kate and then ply it all up. This right here is the lazy Kate that I have. It's from Ashford, and it allows you to have 3 different singles if you want, but of course you can use just 2 of them. And there's just this little rod here that goes through the bobbins. So for example, you would just stick this in, run it through to the top there, and then I'm going to be plying it with this single here. So I just run it through. Oh, there's a little fiber stuck in there. Run it through like this. And then you would just draft the yarn out like this and then ply it together. There are 2 different ways that I have plied my single yarn from a spindle. One of them being using a drop spindle. So you could, here's an example of a bottom whorl drop spindle. You could run it through like this. And then of course, make sure you're going in the right direction, and then ply the yarn like this. When I first started spindle spinning on a drop spindle, this is how I plied the yarn. So you just go in the opposite direction and then wind it onto the top here. So that's one way, and it definitely plays in with the longer meditative process on to spin, but for me, I get so antsy once I have all the singles spun up. I just want to see what the yarn is going to look like. So I usually spin it or ply the yarn onto my wheel. And yeah, I would love to know if there are other ways that you ply your yarn besides using a drop spindle or a wheel. Those are just the 2 that I have personally done, and the only ones that I'm really aware of how to do it. So if there are other ways, I would definitely love to know what those are. To end this video, I just want to show you a couple examples of some yarn that I've spun using a spindle, and I think it's some of the favorite yarn I've ever had. And part of that reason is because it creates a really bouncy, lofty yarn, and it's very warm. And that's because you're spinning long draw. It's just naturally how spindle spinning is, and it's trapping a lot of air in the fiber and using less fiber. So it just it's warmer and it's bouncier, and I just love it. And so this particular skein is the first yarn I ever spun up using spindle. And it is a 3-ply combo spin. I used 3 different braids of color, and I spun those all into singles and plied each braid into one yarn, and it created this beautiful multicolored skein here. It is so lightweight and just bouncy. This fabric is, or this yarn is so squishy and lofty. I love it so much. And then I ended up using my hand carders to blend together a combed top that had multiple different colors dyed throughout, and then I added some Angora fiber in it, and then I blended those all together and rolled it up into a rollag and then spun that with a hand spindle. And this is the yarn that created. And I ended up knitting a hat, the Weekend Hat by Petite Knit, from this yarn here. So this also turned out, I think, very lovely. So yeah, I hope that really helps you out on kind of where to begin if you are wanting to try out supported spindle spinning. Again, I'm going to link all of the information that I have and resources down in the description box below. But if there's anything I miss, feel free to comment, or if you have any other questions, feel free to comment in the comments below, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I certainly really loved making it. Spindle spinning is something that I just absolutely love to do, so I could sit and talk about it all day long. But if you end up starting this and you start spinning with it, I really hope that you can tag me into some of the photos that you may post on it, because I would just love to see everything that you all are making. But that's where I'm going to leave it at right now. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe and you won't miss out on any future content. And until then, I hope you have a good rest of your week, and we will chat next time. Bye!